On today's show, you asked, we listened. Paul and I are going to break down some of the programming improvements that you've asked us for that you're going to start seeing in the next couple of weeks. Find out the two companies getting ready to IPO, both through unicorn status, and check out our interview with Tim Chen of Domain Tools. He's going to talk about leading the company through a pivot and an unintended consequence of the GDPR regulations that might actually make it harder for security to do their jobs, but what we can do about it. That's all today. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by... Are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out Automox. Automox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. Automox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hello and welcome to Business Security Weekly. It's episode number 83. We're recording it live on Monday, April 30th, 2018. It feels like this year is absolutely flying by. This is the show where we look at the business of security so that we can get better at securing business. We want to be your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, innovation, the things that we need to be successful at the business of security today. I am Michael Santar-Cancelo, your straight-talking guide to overcome friction, translate value and understanding, and elevate the performance you need to get the results that you want. And joining me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, your friend and mine, the ever good-looking and always nice Paul Asadorian.
Why, thank you, Michael. I'm Paul Asadorian, your guide to coffee and cigars, because that's what keeps me going.
And we both have the check shirt memo today. So
and like the tea. If someone could bring me in the tea. Yeah. Michael and I have the same exact tea.
Paul introduced me to it. This stuff is great.
That's right. Yeah, don't show the logo. We got to blur it out on camera. Yeah. We don't want to be promoting someone who's not giving us money, okay? Boy.
It's tasty stuff. All right, so what we got on tap for the show today, and I've got a quick announcement I'm going to make about Source Boston 2018. It's next week, everybody. May 9th and 10th. So that's a Wednesday and a Thursday. You can still register. You go to sourceconference.com, use the code SW75, WMKW. You get a $75 discount. Paul is going to be there. Other parts of our team are going to be there. Paul, you're giving a talk. What's your talk on? You're not giving a talk?
No, just drinking my tea. I'm sorry.
Tasty.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And we're going to get all kinds of messages from people asking us what kind of tea we're drinking now.
They'll have to come to a conference and chat with us.
That's it. And so I'll be at Source Boston. I am giving a presentation on Docker security, which is really going to nicely segue into like what I learned, not just about Docker and Docker security, but also DevOps and how it changed the way we do development here, how I've learned about others are doing development. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's good. Well, looking forward to it. That'll be fun. And I am trying to, and Paul and I have been talking about this, and this will come up in some what we're going to do here. We're trying to pick, Paul, I mean, have you looked at how many shows a year you'd like to go to? Is it like, what, 3, 4?
We tend to do about maybe a dozen. I don't necessarily attend all 12 of those. Maybe roughly half or a little more. Certainly the Boston ones I do because it's not really much. It's not really travel.
Far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I tend to heavily focus on the Boston ones, and then do the major ones, and then other ones we tend to send people like Jeff Mann or Doug White or you, Michael, to some of the other shows.
I was gonna say I was looking at going to it's been a while, right? Like every now and then I'll dip my toes in the water and I'll go to some of the shows, and I've been kind of impressed actually with a variety of the shows. And so yes, I'm going to try to end up going to more shows, and that kind of brings us around what we wanted to do here. This will be a fairly quick segment, but we just wanted to update you, the audience. I mean, it's funny, Paul. I got looking about our numbers, but what was episode number 83? I mean, you and I have been at this now from our initial conversations and planning over 2 years, and we'll hit 2 years of shows in 2 months. Mm-hmm. So it's neat for me to kind of step back and look at it. So we made some changes. We started out Startup Security Weekly, and then this year we made that transition to Business Security Weekly, and that's because we were listening. We were already covering leadership and communication stuff, and we were having great conversations with security leaders and those of you that are business-minded, both trying to run your own thing, but then figuring out how to be better with your teams. And so we said, okay, well, so we embraced it. And then as we embraced it, that gave us, it's funny, I felt, Paul, like it gave us the ability to focus more, even though we now could go a little bit wider. And based on the emails that we're getting, the phone calls, the Twitter discussions, and everything else, what we're going to start doing now is adding in some of the pieces that you've asked for. So we talked last week about the value prop scorecard. It's actually something I've looked at it. I've been talking about it for 2 months, and I just started putting some stuff together around it. So Paul and I are going to have a co-branded scorecard that is available to take a look at evaluating the different vendors that you're working with. You can use it anywhere, anytime you want, but definitely at shows and shows that we're going to be at. We're looking at some ways to help you have better conversations, and then let us know the ones that you thought were really good and why, and looking at a way to consistently do this so that if you're on the vendor side, you are better prepared to have these conversations. If you're on the security enterprise side, you're better prepared to assess different vendors, but also to have some of those conversations so that when you go back after the show, you're able to talk about what you liked and why and how. And that's that idea behind that scorecard. So I told people last week they could come to securitycatalyst.com/scorecard, sign up. They still can. Paul and I are figuring out how we're going to make the joint elements to that work. I'm going to put together kind of a beta program on it. So I wanted to chat about this real quick. Paul, have you heard the concept of a lead magnet, or some people call it an opt-in bribe or anything? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, is that like giving something away to a random person who attended? Sure.
Yeah, well, to who attended, or it's the idea like, hey, if you come to my website and you give me your email address, I'll give you this free guide, right. Download now. So what I'm trying to do is similar to that, but different. Because I'm also, like, if you look at the stuff, and we're probably going to keep referring back to Sean D'Souza and how much we've learned from the brain audit and his conversation. He's like, look, I almost don't want you to sign up for my list. Like, if you're signing up, if you want to hear from me, that's because you actually see value in what I'm offering you. You want to hear from me. I'm in the same boat. So what Paul and I have been talking about is, how do we take some of the stuff that's good for our audience, that's good for us, and how we work with our partners on this program, and frankly, good for me and my business and how I work with the enterprises and some of the vendors and the people that I work with. But then also, how do we give some of this away and make it better? So what we also talk about is, good can be the enemy, right? Good, like great or perfect can be the enemy of good enough. And there's that concept of, if it feels like you're waiting too long, you probably are. Like, ship it. Like, you're uncomfortable, great, ship it. So what I'm doing, and I'm doing some work with Dan Wheatley, who we interviewed a couple episodes ago. And we're going to set up like a small beta group to just kind of run through this. There's 3 basic use cases that I've worked with people on with the value scorecard so far, the value prop scorecard. It's first of all, the obvious, evaluating a vendor over the phone, listening to a conversation with us at a show, something like that. The second one is actually evaluating an internal request. It's amazing to me the number of people that are in security today that just get inundated, and we think that's great. And by the way, I sure like that better than when they ignored us. Mm-hmm. But you can't say yes to everything. So how do you know if you're the right person? How do you know the right questions? How do you know where this fits on a party? Turns out you can use the exact same scorecard. And then the third thing is either for you or for your team. So you can use it just to coordinate your thoughts. I've done this a lot. In fact, this is the one, Paul, that surprised me. I've talked to a number of security leaders that, like, literally 20 minutes just running through the scorecard across 3 different things. Suddenly, like, you get clarity on where you need to focus, or the problem. I call it problem selection, but what actually requires your effort. So we're going to put that together. So if you sign up on that now, I was planning to get that started this week based on some of the twists I've made to it. I'm actually probably going to start it next week. That said, I might have some travel now. That if I can confirm it, I'll tell people where next week, because that'll be good, because it means that Paul and I will be together. So if you can figure that out. I'm actually supposed to get confirmation in the next day or two whether I'll be out there next week. So let's figure it. Next 2 weeks, I'm going to run people through these series. And if you want to be part of that early adopter stuff, come sign up, give me your email address. I'll email you the stuff as we got it, and then I'm going to keep working on it. And then eventually, it's going to drive all the programming. So people have already written in. They want to know about, well, what's it like to answer the problem question? They want more questions on impact. And what's cool there is I've had some vendors write in, as well as some folks in the enterprise write in. So I'm going to show you how that works. And then value is one of those elusive topics. So what we're going to start doing is putting together a regular segment looking at these issues and showing you how to do this and how to get better with it. And we easily have 4, 5, 6 segments, a couple months worth of stuff already in process that we're going to work on. But if you've got questions or you've got a use case somewhere where it's helped you, let us know. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we want to know about it with the Value Prop Scorecard. Because if you think about it, that's where I think Paul and I then have a lot of opportunities, both with the shows and with the vendors that we work with, to help foster better conversations with everybody. So that's kind of where we're at with the Value Prop Scorecard and how that's going to unfold into some programming for us. Any thoughts or anything to add on that, Paul?
Yeah, what I think is, well, I think the value prop scorecard is very interesting for the specific use case of you're evaluating the vendor, right? I think in conversations I've had recently, it's kind of opened my eyes up to, like, there's two other sides of that, right? Like, you need to be in tune with your organization, and before you're evaluating vendors, understand what your organization needs, and that's difficult in and of itself, right? Like, you've got all these different groups. What do they want from security? Or maybe they need security, but they really don't want security. And how do you collect requirements and get at what they might want so that when you go to vendors, you have that in mind?
Exactly.
Right? Yep. And then coming out of that, maybe you've made some kind of selection and you're implementing. How do you then communicate that value out to those teams? That seems to be a lot of what people are struggling with in the various calls that I have with folks, is that evaluating the vendor, sure, everyone could use help with that, certainly, but it's those two other activities that one comes before, collecting requirements, and one comes after, communicating value, that are so important, that I think that's really what I look at the show as one of the major problems that we're helping solve in the industry today, are those conversations and communications internally is so important.
Yeah, and so this is going to give us that chance, and we talked about this a little bit last week, the difference between a framework and a system, and outcomes and elements and connections, which are on the structure on the framework side, versus retaining your personal ability or not following that order or whatnot. We're going to start showing people. So anybody who's part of that early beta program, you're going to help me by looking at the use cases and giving me the language to better express to everybody else how this works. And then Paul and I are going to collaborate on that together and start working this through the ability to both use it at conferences and when you're evaluating vendors, and to get the requirement. Everything Paul just said, that's exactly where we're going to go with that. So it gets exciting. And of course, as you've heard us talk about the different books, we posited at least once or twice in passing, like, oh, I wonder if we should do a book club. I wonder if we should do a book club. And we weren't really sure what it would look like or how that would work. But I'll tell you, we're going to do it. I've been looking at how some other people do it in terms of just, hey, this is the book we recommend. I really like it, and it's a paragraph to it. Paul, here's what hit me over the weekend looking at this, and I'll tell everybody, I'm going to hold the book up right now. I didn't assign it a month yet in terms of when we're going to do it. The book is called How to Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People. Here's what happened this weekend. Was out with the family. We have a newly minted 15-year-old in the family, and he's an avid reader. And he said, "Hey, Dad, there's a bookstore. We're at like one of the outlets. Dad, there's a bookstore. Can we go into the bookstore?" Yeah. So we went into the bookstore, and I'm talking with him. Like, he's asking me about books I like, and we're trading off ideas, because I've increased my reading. I try to read fiction weekly, and then I try to pick one or two business or personal improvement books that I'm reading on. Not that mischaracterized self-help, but some cool stuff, things that we've already talked about on the program. So I was talking with him about that, and I was just telling him that you and I have talked about doing some sort of a book club on a regular basis, to pick out some of these books that we like, things that you're listening to for books on tape or whatever we audiobooks now, things that I'm reading, compare the notes between them, but then start talking about how do we then operationalize that. And as I'm talking to him and I'm running through the list of some of the books in my head that I think could make our list, I said, I want you to read these with us. And then I realized, you know what? A lot of the folks that we are working with are individual contributors, but a lot of them are also leaders that are now responsible for their teams. And I said, we should pick books. So I said to them, we should pick books that are good. If you're the leader, these will be great. If you're an individual contributor, these will also be great. If you're both, you're a leader, part of a team, they'll work, but also for your families. You got kids. I'm focusing on books that are things that, probably more teenage, but if you've got teenagers, they can read with you. You can break it down and take a look at it. To which the woman working there says, "Oh, you're going to do a book club like that. Tell me more about your audience." So I talked real quick about security, and she said, "Oh, well, you're going to love this book." And I'll be fair, I was kind of like, "Oh, all right,
here we go."
I guess it'd be awkward to be like, "Nah, please don't." So I followed her. Paul, she hands the book to me, and then she says, "Listen, I love this. This changed my life." I went, "Okay, how?" She said, "Well, I wasn't good at communicating with people. I was kind of awkward, and I didn't really know how to get started with it. I didn't know how to find out what they were looking for, so I wasn't able to help them. So I read this book, and it completely changed it." And then she said to me, "What I learned was you have to understand your own value before you can figure out somebody else's." Now, I've been saying that for years. And I went, "Okay,
right, now you got me.
keep talking. I like the way this is going." And it turns out it was a book written in 1956. So there's nothing new to it. There's no groundbreaking stuff. It's kind of like if you've read How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's the same sort of great advice encapsulated into this. It looks, I skimmed it quick on, standing there. Fairly straightforward read. But based on her endorsement, I was like, all right, well, this is the kind of book that we're going to do. So that's what we're looking at. Stuff it's not going to take you hundreds of hours to read. In my opinion, it's the kind of thing that if you break it down at the beginning of the month, and read a little bit every day or a little bit every week, by the time we do the review, you should be good. And I'm thinking we'll give everybody about 30-day notice. And if I can, I'll try to come up with some sort of a plan to break it down. But this is where I'm open for advice. Let us know, do you want a plan? Do you want some structure on it? Do you want a way to take notes? Do you want to compare those things? We don't have yet an apparatus set up from a community perspective. This is really going to be, we put some stuff together and you can contribute some ideas in. And then, a month later, Paul and I will lay out what we liked, what we thought. And if we can, we'll try to grab some of the authors for interviews and stuff like that. But I got to tell you, this excites me because I feel like this is the kind of thing where good books will come forth that really help us as an industry have better conversations. So I'm excited about that.
Me too. And what was the name of that? What was the name of that book that she recommended, Michael?
How to Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People.
And who's the author?
Les Giblin. Les Giblin. Giblin. You know what, too? I'll look it up. I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Perfect.
It was not an expensive book. It's 100 pages. I'm gonna say one more thing on this for now. Oh, it's 147 pages. When I wrote Into the Breach, one of the deans at the school I attended and graduated from offered to help out and review it with me, and he came back and among the advice he had for me, I loved the way he delivered. He said, "Do you read?" I said, "Of course I read." He said, "How many books on your bookshelf right now have you started but not finished?" So, I don't know, 5, 6. He's like, "Great. I want you to go home. Tell me what page you stopped reading at." I came back and most of them were somewhere between 100 and 150. He goes, "Great. I want you to go back and revise this until it's about 100 to 150 pages."
Yep.
And I'm like, "So I got to cut it in half." He's like, "Well, do you want people to read it or are you writing it to have an ego?" I'd like people to actually read it. He's like, "Great. I want you to do that." And so now, when I see another book that's at that lower page count,
right.
The funny thing is people are like, "Oh, it must be easy to write." No, it's actually harder.
It is.
It's like 2 more rounds of revision to get it done. But I'll tell you what, that's a book that you can consume. That's a book you can consume and act on. So that's the type of thing that we're looking forward to. And then, so Paul, and I know a lot of the people who listen to us, do you do Audible? Is that where you get your audiobooks?
I do Audible.
Okay. So what I think what we should do for requirements then is make sure that there's a Kindle version, an Audible version, and and then of course for those of you who still prefer it,
paperback,
trade books, paperback or hardcover. If I can, I'll look for things that are also in the libraries where you can get it. We'll try to announce it a month ahead of time, and then we'll work through it. But again, this is where if you've got ideas, what would be great? You know what I've seen? just keep in mind what we're trying to do is something that's good from like a programming perspective. Not sure we're gonna have a lot of time right now for individual attention, but open to all the ideas on that. Which leads us to the next part: segments on improving performance. So again, some of this is driven, and I really love this. Paul and I sometimes, how do you say it, Paul? You and I are never at a loss for words. Like we laugh about it, but we have good conversations when it's just us, and when we have good conversations with other people, and we've invited our audience in to be part of that with us. So along the way, we've talked about ways to give better feedback. We've talked about the journaling, or I've recently been experimenting with bullet journals with the kids and different ways to think about planning for the day. And rather than just have it as part of an article discussion or an in-passing comment, like I've talked about this idea of the 2-week test and where I started with it, but how it's really kind of worked itself out. These things have fashioned into it. A couple of you wrote in and said, well, cool. So how does that work? Which caused me to step back and say, maybe I ought to sit down and try to figure it out. Coincidentally, with my own kids, I've sat down and started to try to figure it out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start to put together some of these topics, and I'm looking at a couple different structures. One of them is something I picked up from the brain audit. It's called 13 boxes. If that works, I'll then introduce that concept and show you what that looks like by doing it. So we're going to start trying to put those. Now, here's the code, right? When we put regular segments, it means the ideal is monthly, but some months we might not. And that's really just going to be a function of, frankly, whether I get my act together or not.
Michael, in speaking of improving performance, I've gone through in my career so many different ways to track tasks and do or try to do project management, right? And I've done the getting things done, right? And the to-do waiting in the email. Like someone once said, well, create folders in your email. One's to do, one's you're waiting on someone else, one's complete or whatever. Inbox to zero, right? That whole strategy. I've used every piece of technology I could get my hands on, everything from Evernote to just text message. And I think that should be maybe one of the earlier segments we do on this. One thing that I'm going to try that I want to get your feedback, maybe some listener feedback as well, is after reading the Phoenix Project and I actually started reading the goal, is having the Kanban boards, Kanban. I don't know how you say that. Kanban. Is that
Kanban.
Right? That to do, doing, done. And I was like, well, maybe I need to add another category. Like I'm waiting on other people, and then I can move tasks between them. And toying with using Trello to track that. I'm not sure if you are using Trello or have used Trello, Michael. But in speaking of improving performance, that's and I've done everything to I'm going to write it in a notepad to I'm just going to show up at work and work on whatever's on fire at the moment.
What's funny? I'll tell you what. That's Paul. I think I shared with you before, or maybe even on the program. But a lot of the teams I worked with last year, I started asking, how do you plan your day? How do you plan your week? And that was the number one thing. Most people just I don't know. I show up and I deal with whatever needs my attention. I was like, wow. To answer your question, yes, I use Trello and I use a Kanban approach. I actually started using LeanKit, and I really liked a lot of what they did. I thought it was great. I made the transition to Trello for a couple reasons, including the ability to integrate with my family easier, quite frankly, cheaper. To answer your question, what I do, and quick, and we'll break down a segment on this. One of the things I love about Trello is I have different boards. So I have a board I call Inbox, and that's just stuff as it comes to me, and I'm not sure necessarily where it goes. I stick it there. Once a week, I go through it. I also have a board that I call Backlog. So instead of having the backlog as part of my main board, I keep it out of the way.
I like that.
And then in my backlog, I have it sorted into, this is next 3 days, the next week to 2 weeks, the next month, and further out than that, I can't even think about it. And that way, what that's let me do is start quickly looking at my backlog and realizing, whoa, I got way too much stuff to do here, versus, oh, okay, that seems reasonable. All right, I kind of like the flow of it all. In the week itself, or in the day, I have the ready, the doing. I have a hold, and then I have a done. And I use the hold for things that are blocked because I'm waiting on somebody else or whatever else. What I liked about some more classic Kanban stuff like Lean Kit was they gave you the chance to put that, put reasons and stuff in there. But just using it by myself, Trello is great. Look, I'm in an Apple ecosystem. I got a Trello app on all my devices.
Right.
And I can keep myself in sync. I've figured out how to use it. I like it a lot. So I use the same Kanban methodology within Trello. I'm going to say two things that really surprised me on it, and then I'll find someone or I've got a couple thoughts on people that might be willing to come and talk about how to do this better. The thing that surprised me were one, visualizing your work, so important. Like that made a huge impact in the Phoenix project. And it was around then, probably when I first read that I really started looking at this or thinking about it. And I started with just Post-it notes up on the wall until I could kind of figure out how to make it all work. I would say after a year or two, and I think other people can go faster, but it was really clear to me, let's say after the first year, I can get a feel for how much I can do. The biggest thing it did for me, Paul, was I got to look at stuff and say, I have overloaded myself. There is no freaking way I can be successful this week. And I started putting even less stuff in the ready pile, keeping it on the backlog, keeping it out of sight. Right. Now, I knew it was there, but I kept it out of sight. I got a lot more productive. The other thing then is I actually now take time on every Friday or sometimes a little bit like on one of the weekend mornings. And I look at what I got done, and it's fascinating because most of us, the way we've done our task list or the way we're always responding to everything, we get to the end and we're like, man, I didn't get anything done this week. What did it account for? And I started to realize we need to flip that. As long as you're not padding it with crap like take the dog out, get the newspaper, answer the phone, but like real things that you need to get done, you can get to the end of the week and go, oh, look what I got done. When you start putting less stuff in at the beginning of the week, focusing on finishing, you actually get more stuff done. I think it's great. I'll add one more piece to it for now, and I'm making a note so I remember to do it. I also now incorporate the Ivy Lee method into it. It's a person, Ivy Lee. I'll dig up the story on it. I'm almost 100% confident it's been in our show notes during an article discussion. The bottom line is this. At the end of your day today, you write down the 6 things you want to get done tomorrow in priority order. You probably won't get 6 things done. In fact, if you just got one done, that's great. That first one, that's what you start with at the top of your day. Nothing else until that one's done, and then you work through it. I find, in all fairness, I'm more for like the schedule out 3 to 5 things a day, and no more than that. I'm much more effective as a result. So this is great. So yeah, we'll make this one of the early ones. And
sweet.
Thoughts on it? I know some of you have helped me with Kanban or ways to think about it. So let us know if there's books you like, resources, some of the technologies and tools you're liking, and what experts you like. And we'll reach out, see if we maybe can't get them to join us, talk about it. Same vein, we're doing more audience-driven segments. Some of you have been really patient, and believe me, we really appreciate it. This has been something that I've been excited about for a while. Paul and I have been talking about for a while, and it was just that, trying to figure out how to operationalize stuff. I mean, I hope you guys realize Security Weekly has really grown. Paul's vision for this stuff is great. He's built a fantastic team around it. So when you guys see me in studio excited, that's because I'm excited. And it's better every time I get there. This is going to be that continuation of that. So for our show in specific, some of you written in, you wanted to understand stock options, and you want to understand them generically, but also how they work with startups versus going to traditional companies as part of that, jobs and what you need to offer people and everything else. We'll break that down. The side hustle keeps coming up, as does lifestyle business. There are some different things to think about there. And a bunch of you have written in about how we've inspired you to do some side hustle stuff. That's great. Then you're going to love this value prop work and the value prop scorecard, because you need to be able to pass that if someone were to ask you those types of questions. But we recently had somebody ask us about licensing. We had a great question about, well, if you've got an idea, how do you share your idea and still protect the intellectual property that you have? And different things like that. So basically what happens is when you write in with ideas or questions, I take note of them. I've got a list of them, and we're going to start looking ahead. Now, these are going to require a little bit more research on our part. I, of course, don't mind doing it. I get excited about it. But that's why, again, it's regular. Our goal here over, I'd say, the next couple months is to get to the point where we have a pretty regular schedule. So you're always going to get a guest with a fun interview. And then you've got one of these segments, and then we'll keep tracking the innovation like we've been doing. So those are some of the changes that you're going to see. And as you've seen, the set continues to improve. I think we've got a great working relationship across the whole team, and we really collaborate on how do we produce something that's better for you if you're watching or listening to us.
You just spawned a great idea, Michael. Actually, our attorney for Security Weekly, I've actually presented with him at Source Boston several years ago. Continues to be our attorney to this day. Would be, he's local here in Rhode Island, and would be an awesome, in-studio guest to talk about a couple of things. His specialty is business law, essentially, in helping businesses with various things, including intellectual property. Although, by his own admission, when it gets to a certain point, he does have others that he brings in when like IP gets really, really nasty, when you're doing depositions or trial. But he's just an awesome communicator, an awesome attorney, very, very smart. So I think, Kaz would be awesome on the show. Plus, he likes to smoke cigars, and he'd come hang with me in the studio, and it'd be good times.
There you go. That's a solid deal. Yeah, and I'm going to keep looking for ways to make it back up to the studio and do stuff in studio. I love being up there with everybody. So we're going to keep looking for those types of things. And to your point, Paul, if I'm out and about, we'll make it work. So that's what we got coming up. You can hit us. I'm at Catalyst on Twitter. Paul's at Security Weekly. You can send us Facebook comments. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. You can send us email. You can send me email. However it works out. Just please know we've been listening, and we love the engagement, the feedback, the ideas, the questions, the pushback. All of it's been fantastic. This is what we're working on. Would love to know what you think about it and what else we could add to it and make it better for you. So with that, we'll take a quick break, which is a good chance to check us out at securityweekly.com. You can figure out how to respond back to us. Check out the show notes in the wiki. Check out our full line of programming, including our on-demand and our webinars and all the great stuff that we've got coming up. When we come back, 2 companies in security getting ready to IPO, both looking for valuations in the billions.